At exactly 800 hours, hovering silently at 25,000 feet over the Strait of Hormuz, the EP-3E Ares II reconnaissance aircraft scanning the coastline felt a digital tremor that shouldn't have existed. This wasn't a standard radar ping. It was a rhythmic, aggressive pulse that bypassed the usual filtering software of the American sensors. The Ares is an aging airframe, but its guts are packed with the most sophisticated signal intelligence hardware in the world. Its mission was critical but routine: map the safe passage for the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group before it entered the world's most dangerous choke point. But suddenly, the passive detection screens on board the Ares lit up like a Christmas tree. Not 10, not 20, but hundreds of fire control radar signals simultaneously locked on to the American fleet. For the crew in the back of the Ares, the sight was haunting. This was theoretically impossible. Intelligence reports confirmed Iran only had 3 active batteries in this sector, but the sensors weren't lying. The U.S. fleet had just sailed directly into a saturation kill box. In less than 2 minutes, a volley of over 500 missiles would be airborne, threatening to turn the pride of the U.S. Navy into a burning graveyard in the narrowest strait on Earth. However, Tehran made a fatal miscalculation. While they were busy illuminating the U.S. fleet with what they believed to be the ultimate ambush provided by their friend in the north, they were completely unaware that a solitary shadow was already operating deep within their digital perimeter. A platform that doesn't fire missiles, but fires logic bombs. A ghost in the machine that was about to turn their greatest strength into a suicidal weakness. This was the opening move of a conflict that would redefine the concept of naval warfare forever. The confidence radiating from the Iranian coastal bunkers was palpable, fueled by the belief that they had finally cornered the invincible American carrier. They had spent years preparing for this specific 15-minute window, utilizing Russian-engineered deception tactics to create a digital mirage that the Pentagon's finest analysts never saw coming. Tehran's confidence tonight is not built on blind arrogance. It is constructed on the most spectacular deception of the 21st century. To break the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, the Pentagon ordered the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group to move into position. But before the first destroyer could cross the line, the U.S. Navy deployed its premier airborne reconnaissance platform, the EP-3E Ares II. Its mission was simple: triangulate the electromagnetic signatures of Iran's coastal defense batteries, specifically the deadly C-802 Noor anti-ship missiles. On the screens inside the reconnaissance aircraft, the coastline should have shown perhaps 3 or 4 active radar sites. Instead, the displays erupted. Hundreds of distinct C-802 target acquisition radars appeared simultaneously along the entire Zagros mountain range. This was the first layer of the trap, a masterpiece of electronic mimicry. Iran, receiving critical hardware from Moscow, had deployed a vast network of high-fidelity decoy emitters. These were not simple metal reflectors or static noisemakers. They were advanced electronic warfare nodes capable of mimicking the exact pulse repetition frequency and waveform of a live fire control radar. They even simulated the warm-up signatures of vacuum tubes and the specific cooling fan vibrations that American SIGINT operators are trained to look for. The U.S. commanders fell for the classic intelligence confirmation bias. They trusted their sensors implicitly because the sensors were giving them exactly what they expected to see: a massive saturation-level threat. But in reality, they were looking at a ghost army. To kill these ghosts, the U.S. Navy was about to make its first mistake, committing its most expensive stealth assets to attack empty mountains. The sheer scale of the decoy network was a testament to the new era of cognitive deception, where the goal isn't just to hide your own forces, but to force the enemy to fight a war against entities that don't exist, wasting their limited munitions and exposing their true positions in the process. At 0830 hours, hours. The Combined Air Operations Center on the USS Gerald R. Ford gave the green light, believing they had successfully mapped the enemy's coastal defense network. The order was given to launch the tip of the spear, 2 squadrons of F-35C Lightning IIs. These are the crown jewels of the Navy's aerial arsenal, designed to be invisible to the world's most advanced radars. Their mission was to slip through the detected coverage gaps and neutralize the hundreds of C-802 sites with precision-guided munitions. But at 0842 hours, just as the strike package crossed the 12-mile territorial limit, the rules of the game changed. Tehran did not activate their fire control radars as expected. Instead, deep within the Zagros Mountains, the Russian-made Avtobaza-M passive emitter tracking systems silently came online. These systems represent the ultimate nightmare for stealth pilots. They do not emit a single radio wave for the F-35s to detect. They simply listen. They track the minute electromagnetic disturbances and background hole in the atmosphere created by the aircraft's avionics and skin friction. In an instant, the invisible F-35s were stripped of their greatest advantage. On the Iranian command screens, the stealth fighters appeared as clear, undeniable targets. The pilots, unaware they were being tracked by passive means, continued their approach, believing they were still ghosts in the night. The silence in the Iranian bunkers was heavy with anticipation as the operators watched the F-35s fly deeper into the kill zone. However, the U.S. Navy does not panic when Plan A fails. They switch to brute force. The realization that their stealth was compromised hit the American commanders like a physical blow. The tactical displays shifted from green to a flashing, ominous red. The mission commander, realizing his invisible jets were now sitting ducks, immediately ordered the deployment of the EA-18G Growlers. If the F-35s could not be invisible ghosts, they would become blinding suns, using every ounce of electromagnetic energy to claw back the advantage in a fight that was rapidly spiraling out of control. At 0845 hours, the Growlers surged forward, activating their ALQ-99 jamming pods at maximum output. They blasted a wall of high-powered electronic noise across the entire spectrum, a literal tsunami of static designed to blind every Iranian sensor from the coast to the capital. For 5 minutes, it seemed to work. The Iranian radar screens went black, and American commanders began to breathe a sigh of relief. The jamming appeared to be a total success, but they had underestimated the depth of the trap. Iran did not try to fight through the interference. They simply changed the laws of physics governing the battlefield. Realizing the radio frequency spectrum was now useless, Iranian commanders in the underground bunkers flipped a switch that NATO had never seen used on this scale. They transitioned from radar guidance to electro-optical tracking. High atop the Zagros peaks, passive thermal imaging sensors, immune to electronic jamming, locked on to the searing heat exhaust of the American jets. This targeting data wasn't transmitted through the air where it could be jammed. It flowed down through buried fiber optic cables directly to the launch computers deep underground. Suddenly, the mountainsides erupted. The Bavar 373 air defense systems fired a salvo of Syad-4B interceptors. These missiles were not riding a radar beam, they were flying on inertial guidance updates fed by the optical sensors, completely silent to the American sensors. Inside the cockpit of Viper 1, the pilot's radar warning receiver remained terrifyingly silent. There was no lock-on tone, no electronic scream to warn him of impending death. The only warning came from his wingman's frantic voice over the radio. "Smoke in the air, 6 o'clock, low, brake left." The physics had shifted. The U.S. Navy was no longer fighting a digital war. They were in a knife fight in the dark, and their opponent was using night vision goggles. The missiles, guided by the heat of the F-35's engines, were closing the distance at Mach 4, turning the sky into a gauntlet of fire that no amount of electronic noise could suppress. By 9 a.m., the tactical situation for the U.S. Navy reached a point of catastrophic failure. The EA-18G Growler's wideband jamming was entirely ineffective against Iran's passive optical tracking network. The F-35C strike package was being systematically engaged by hypersonic interceptors that emitted no warning signals. With the physical strike assets under fire and the electronic warfare escort blind, the U.S. Navy Command initiated the final contingency, the deployment of the EA-37B Compass Call 2, often referred to as Ghost Rider or the commercial aircraft from hell, due to its Gulfstream-based airframe. This platform is built for cognitive electronic warfare. It does not attempt to shout louder than the enemy. It rewrites the enemy's internal logic. Circling at the edge of the engagement zone, the EA-37B activated its SWORD software suite. Its AESA arrays began a high-speed scan of the Iranian coastal defense grid. The objective was the air gap, the theoretical disconnect between Iran's underground command network and the outside world. While the main command lines were buried in fiber optic cables, the system required physical junction boxes to connect to mobile missile launchers and Russian satellite uplink dishes. At these specific hardware interfaces, a phenomenon known as side-channel emissions occurred. Minute electromagnetic pulses leaked from the decoding equipment during high-speed data transfers. The EA-37B locked onto these electromagnetic leaks. Utilizing injection spoofing, the mission computer synthesized data packets that precisely mimicked the Iranian command protocol's proprietary handshake. It did not try to block the signal. It inserted itself into the communication stream like a digital parasite. This was the non-kinetic solution that the Pentagon had been refining for years, a weapon that doesn't destroy hardware, but forces the hardware to commit treason. The EA-37B was no longer just an electronic warfare jet. It had become the master of the Iranian network, silently browsing their files and preparing to execute a command that would end the battle before another shot was fired. The EA-37B executed a high-precision digital manipulation that would make a master hacker blush. It modified the identification friend or foe IFF parameters in the Iranian Bavar 373 fire control computers. Through the manipulated junction boxes, the USS Spruance was digitally relabeled as a hostile unidentified vessel, while the Iranian flagship, the Iris Jamaran, was concurrently relabeled as a friendly support craft. But then, the Compass Call took it a step further. It inverted the target coordinates. The deception was total. Within the Okab 44 underground bunker, the Iranian fire control console displayed a verified lock on what the software insisted was a high-value American target. The commander, viewing the data through the compromised command link, authorized an immediate strike. 4 Noor anti-ship missiles were initialized and launched. Because the EA-37B had redirected the missile's target recognition software, the projectiles bypassed the American fleet entirely. Instead, the missiles locked onto their own flagship, the Iris Jamaran. The Iranian Defense Network, through its own automation and the U.S. Navy's systemic exploit, had effectively directed a strike against its own naval command center. The impact was devastating. The Iris Jamaran, the pride of the Iranian Navy, never even saw the missiles coming, because its own IFF system told it the incoming projectiles were friendly. The resulting explosion created a total cascade failure within the Iranian command and control network. As the flagship listed and secondary explosions rocked the strait, the Iranian bunker complex at Okab 44 entered a mandatory system reboot protocol to isolate the corrupted data links. This initiated a 180-second window of absolute vulnerability. For 3 minutes, the entire automated air defense grid was offline, unable to process target data or execute fire commands. The silence in the Iranian bunkers was no longer one of anticipation. It was the silence of absolute, paralyzed shock. At 0908 hours, the EA-37B Compass Call 2 transitioned into a hold-down mode, maintaining a constant high-intensity localized electronic saturation across the communication hubs of the OGOB-44 base. By preventing the Iranian engineers from manually bypassing the corrupted fire control software, the Ghost Rider acted as the essential enabler, pinning the enemy's digital defenses in a state of permanent paralysis. With the air defense network neutralized, the Combined Air Operations Center signaled the executioners, a pair of B-21 Raider stealth bombers. These ghost bombers, operating in total silence, penetrated Iranian airspace at high altitude. Leveraging the 180-second window created by the EA-37B, the bombers opened their internal weapon bays. They did not aim for the radar arrays or the missile launchers. They targeted the structural integrity of the mountain complex itself. The B-21s deployed a series of GBU-72/B advanced 5K penetrator bunker-busting munitions. These weapons, engineered to defeat the deepest subterranean facilities, were programmed to impact the primary blast doors and the ventilation shafts of the OGOB-44 base. The GBU-72s struck with surgical precision. The shock waves from the 5,000-pound warheads propagated through the granite foundations, causing the reinforced tunnel entrances to collapse in a roar of dust and twisted steel. The primary exits were sealed by thousands of tons of rock and concrete, effectively entombing the entire fleet of mobile missile launchers and drones within the mountain. The Iranian base was not obliterated in a nuclear fireball, but it was rendered inert. The $13 billion fortress was transformed into a subterranean prison. The U.S. Navy's strike package had achieved a mission kill, neutralizing the threat without the need for a protracted ground invasion or a massive loss of life. The B-21s banked away, their signature drop and ghost reflections making them vanish from whatever sensors were still functioning, leaving behind a mountain range that had become a silent monument to the failure of static defenses in a dynamic war. The U.S. Navy's strike package achieved a mission kill, but the conflict wasn't over until the final act of desperation. By 0912 hours, 9 of the last remaining fast attack craft from their coastal bunkers launched a suicide Wolfpack attack directly at the USS Gerald R. Ford. Their goal was to close the gap to within 5 nautical miles, where long-range defense systems would become ineffective. On the Arleigh Burke destroyers, the Aegis Baseline 10 system automatically analyzed data from the SPY-6 radar. This was a moment of life and death, where every decision had to be made in milliseconds. The Helios system on the aircraft carrier was activated. High-energy laser beams cut through the night, igniting the fuel tanks of the lead ships before they could even fire. At the same time, RIM-162 ESS-M missiles destroyed the enemy's short-range anti-ship missiles in mid-air. The entire Wolfpack formation was annihilated. Tehran's desperate gamble ended in the stillness of the sea, leaving only oil slicks and burning debris. In the distance, long-range electronic reconnaissance systems detected Russian-flagged refueling aircraft making an emergency U-turn back towards Syria. Their presence had become meaningless. As the sun began to rise, the world woke up to a new reality. It wasn't just about who had the biggest missiles anymore, it was about who owned the logic within the machines. The Strait of Hormuz remained open, but the invisible scars left on the digital landscape would haunt military strategists for decades. The ghost in the machine had proven that in the age of cognitive warfare, your own weapons might just be your greatest enemy. The ambush was over, but the war for the electromagnetic spectrum had only just begun. The question now isn't whether you can see the enemy, but whether you can trust the eyes that are looking at them.